I'm Sam Faddis. This is Ground Truth, and we're going to pick up today talking again about the Russia hoax, Spygate, the coup attempt, whatever name you want to stick on it. And with us, again, a friend of the show, old colleague of mine, a lady who knows what she's talking about when we're talking about intelligence and the CIA, because she's been an operator. In fact, we met many decades ago on the street in the middle of an operation, if I recall correctly. Sabrina DeSousa. Sabrina, welcome.
Thank you.
So look, we were constantly talking about this whole business with the Spygate, whatever name we want to stick on this. And let me give you an analogy here, which maybe is a little tortured, but bear with me and humor me for a little while. There's this old story, kind of a parable, about these blind men and an elephant, and they're all brought up to the elephant, and each one touches a different part of the elephant. I think theoretically this story comes out of India. Whether that's true or not, or whether the Brits just made that up, I have no idea. But one of them,
no, I heard that a while ago.
One of them touches the trunk and he thinks it's a snake, and one of them touches the leg and he thinks it's like a tree, etc. Anyway, the point is they're all trying to reach a conclusion about the whole based on just this limited amount of data. They touch one piece of a much bigger thing. And I use that analogy because I think it applies here in terms of this Spygate thing. Pieces of the conspiracy have become more or less visible. And people, particularly folks who, normal people, not like you and I, who don't have the background in intelligence operations that we do, sort of try to conclude, that based on what I see, that's the conspiracy, without an understanding that what we're talking about is much bigger. So what I'd really like to focus on today is talking about Page and Strzok, but just generally leaks, their comments about leaks and so forth. Very recently, Senator Johnson, who I think is head of the Homeland Security Committee in the U.S. Senate, came out and talked about the extraordinary number of leaks once Trump took office, something like 125 leaks, and 60 plus of them serious national security leaks, serious information being divulged. And in that, he was also referring to a timeline of kind of the overall conspiracy. And in that references, amongst other things, both Page and Strzok, these two FBI agents who were having an affair, talking about how the sisters were leaking, by which they mean CIA, commenting on how many leaks, and they seem a little surprised by it in the sense that they're not against it, but they don't seem to be, even though those leaks clearly are part of the broader conspiracy, they don't seem to be aware in advance that they're going to happen, and they seem to be a little surprised by it, suggesting again what you and I are always talking about, which is there are levels to this conspiracy well above their pay grade, even though they're both senior folks. Is that making sense, or you think I'm imagining things here?
Oh no, that makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. And so we can start with the David Ignatius, Michael Flynn, and not really unmasking, but leaking his name out, and the Strzok Page text. Actually, they talked about it, in which case, this thing was leaked. But again, who had access to the information of his identity being an American citizen would only be at the very senior levels of the CIA, and then it would move parallel across, not come down, filter to the rank and file, which means that this leak operated at a very high level. And Strzok and Page also, it's kind of interesting, they also acknowledge what a masterful job, and in fact they say, they're much better than us at this PR stuff, and they're handling this issue. And most significantly, they say, look, we didn't agree with that headline that Russia colluded to get Trump into office. It really was HRC, and the Russia whole thing, that was the true part. The rest of the Russia stuff was not true at all. So they're having this conversation amongst themselves after also that the election took place. And also, really, it's very revealing in how this amongst themselves at the FBI, there was a little bit of dissent. Who at the last minute was scrambling around because after the elections to kind of what are we going to do now? So the leadership would not tell the rank and file, which is Strzok and Page, what was going on, or the CIA wasn't telling them what they were doing and what they were leaking. And then the British, in the meanwhile, were really angry. The rank and file over there, few, were really angry, and they were venting, evidently, at the US official over there about being used in a way.
Mhm.
Because they never anticipated this is how their information was going to be used. So at the end, it just seems like, again, the CIA does a masterful job, Brennan particularly, and Brennan had a huge vested interest in this whole thing at not directly, sometimes when this whole thing began, he didn't directly leak. What he did was go off to the Hill to Harry Reid and say, I think there's something over here. Talk to the Gang of Eight, and immediately that expanded who all knew about this, and obviously then the situation of leaks gets significantly expanded, and that's exactly what happened. So he kind of used the Congress and he used everybody to do his work for him.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, there's an element there that I think characterizes the methodology at work in this entire coup attempt, which is what I think it is, which is you have this hidden hand, my phrase that I'm enamored of, that sort of points people in various directions where they have essentially, they've sort of left Easter eggs, like they've just put out clues, left information, and then they direct people toward it so that when they stumble across it, find it, or have it, then it appears that it was all sort of served. It was all fortuitous. But back to this issue of the leaks. Okay, so you have 60 plus leaks that appear to all be part of a coordinated effort. They are part of the perception management, the propaganda, the PR that you've talked about in every conversation we've had. This is all covert action. Covert action is not always blowing something up. It is often propaganda, and that's exactly what this is. But you've got 60 plus leaks of national security information, very damaging things. So Strzok and Page are clearly saying in their text, this is coming out of CIA. Again, I'm not tarring everybody in the Central Intelligence Agency by any stretch of the imagination, but this is coming from Brennan and whoever's with Brennan, because Brennan has acknowledged his role in this.
Actually, they said from CI, so that would lead me to believe from the fusion cell,
Right.
Those in the fusion cell at the time.
So if you've got, first of all, 60 plus leaks, national security, Senator Johnson, head of the Homeland Security Committee, has acknowledged were significantly damaging to national security. So that in and of itself is a whole series of massive crimes. But more back to the thesis that I'm focused on here. This can't just be John Brennan by himself doing this. First of all, he can't be releasing this information without approval from his superiors. Like the White House can't be sitting there clueless while their CIA director floods the airwaves with classified information. And there's something like 18 separate news outlets, according to Senator Johnson, that received this information. So that's a lot of points of contact. I guess where I'm going with this is there are a lot of moving parts here. There have to be a significant number of other individuals yet unidentified in order for something on the scale to have happened.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right, because one person wouldn't do it. And also, it would be that Brennan's going to try and hide his hand and protect Obama as well throughout this process. And this is exactly what would be done. This is what covert propaganda is all about. And you and I know that. The CIA has excelled at this for decades long. And this is Brennan using CIA resources and agency and IC resources for his own personal agenda at the end of the day. Because unlike the FBI, who were a little leery initially to get into this, and the British who didn't quite know why they were getting into this, he had it out for Flynn. He had it out for Trump, especially, all throughout President Trump and President Obama as well. They were really concerned, what if this guy wins, but we think Hillary is going to. So the FBI were all, well, Hillary is going to be the president tomorrow. We don't have to worry about this. But Brennan and Obama were really concerned about this.
So on this issue of, I don't know what the right term is, authorization, top cover maybe is a better term. You've got Brennan at the heart of what he keeps calling a fusion cell, what I sort of regard as the nerve center of this whole coup attempt. You've got very large quantities of what is classified information being used in a covert action effort, released deliberately to the press. If you didn't have White House top cover for that, and if you didn't have really at the most senior levels top cover for this, then when you have this flood of information coming out, I would think you would have to find people at the most senior levels, including President Obama, immediately stepping in to say what. In other words, if you weren't on board with it, you'd be stepping in saying, "What in the name of God is going on? Who is doing this?" And in the midst of this, of course, we have an election, and Trump comes into office, and the effort continues after President Obama steps down. But that doesn't change the fact that President Obama and all of his most senior people would have still been privy to everything that had transpired and have visibility into it. And at a minimum, even after stepping down from office, you would think, okay, no matter how I feel about Donald Trump, if I'm not part of this, I would feel compelled to stand up and uncover what's going on. Again, you might be the most diehard opponent of President Trump, but you would say, I'm not going to stand by and watch people perpetrate a coup attempt against a president in the United States of America. But of course, we've had exactly the opposite. I mean, at the most, we've had deafening silence, and on the other end of it, we've had people lending support to this. So this is back to this conversation that you and I have all the time, which is how high does this thing go? And is it possible to envision all these leaks, all of this information, all this activity, and not have it go all the way to the Oval Office? Is that even possible?
Yeah. The other thing too, once President Trump was elected, these guys, Brennan, possibly Obama, knew exactly what they had done before.
Right.
They retained their clearances, and if you look at tweets coming out of Brennan, they're very carefully crafted, not to give away anything, but sort of put it out there, not really, insinuating something, but really reinforcing this whole Russia thing, that Trump is, that the president is, does not fit to be in office. And it just continued overtly after that, once he was gone. Before, you had this whole thing. Quite quickly, the same thing played out in Italy with Mifsud. Remember Mifsud? Right. The guy. So that also, if Obama here was involved, that would have been the government over there as well. And they've done the same thing. Oh, look there, Mifsud, he's the key to everything. And to make him really make everyone go after like this piece of meat with, like the dogs after this hound, he disappears. And everyone's looking for him. They think it's really important. It's not. What it's doing is hiding. The hidden hand over there is around the prime minister's office, because there's no way Brennan would be talking to someone like Mifsud or anything like that. The FBI were running this thing out of the embassy. They were meeting with Steele. They were meeting with Papadopoulos, the whole thing. This is the rank and file crowd over there that had the blessing. And this is what they threw out after this whole thing went through. But so that's, I think, we're going to find out soon. And, there's and also you and I think we've talked about this. Do you think this was Brennan's insurance policy? Brennan, Morell, Clapper, and and Hayden. huge push to have Gina Haspel be the director. Was this the insurance policy, considering she was in London and obviously since the Brits played a big part in this, would have known what was going on.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the other dimension to this, right, that you and I have touched on before, which is there's not just the question. I mean, what we're basically saying is, okay, look, everybody's obsessed with people like Page and Strzok, and they're obsessed with them because information concretely about them has come out, and you've seen it in the press. But what we keep coming back to is what you're looking at is, you're touching the trunk, you're obsessed with the trunk, but it's an elephant. It's a much bigger thing, and it doesn't just go higher. It's much broader. And yes, absolutely. If you're Brennan and you're at the heart of this conspiracy, and which I think in my opinion, he's placed himself at the heart of it, admitted that he was at the heart of it, really. And now you're leaving office, as you've pointed out many times, kind of unexpectedly. Oh my God, Trump actually won. Well, yeah, you do have to have an insurance policy, right? You can't leave the store and let somebody come in after you that will honestly go through all the files and all the records and see that justice is done, and turn over every stone. You absolutely got to put somebody in that will continue to cover your tracks. And given what we know about Ms. Haspel, entirely possible that not only is she loyal to Brennan, but frankly, entirely possible she was part of this whole thing. So that much more motivation to just keep it all hushed up, because if this whole thing collapses, she's going down with it.
Right. And it's starting to unravel right now with Grenell being in there and now Ratcliffe. So the other thing about Brennan, people didn't talk about it. The focus was on the FBI. But a week or so ago, the press secretary finally turned around and said, and again, people can, discount her and things like that, but she said, the worst of the worst actors in this entire thing is John Brennan, period. And the last time the president said, I was spied on, this is what happened, the intelligence community, I don't trust them, people just, started criticizing him. But now, the minute she came out and she said that, even though we don't see a lot coming out on Brennan right now, and that's possible and it's possible you won't for a lot, like we're seeing the stuff being released about the FBI right now, is because they will not release anything that Durham considers to be criminal in nature and as part of his investigation.
Sure. Big factor that I think everybody needs to keep in mind. As Attorney General Barr has reminded us multiple times, Durham was not put in place to produce a report. He's not an inspector general. He's not going to write a commission report recommending changes.
Right.
He's a prosecutor conducting a criminal investigation. And when he concludes his investigation, there will be indictments issued, presumably, unless somehow, strangely enough, he finds nobody to indict, which I find it very hard to believe. So that's when we will actually see it. And probably even then, we won't see all of the evidence until they begin presenting it in court.
Right. The one thing just to add to that is I don't know how exactly legally things may play out, because people have touched on it a little bit, is clearly they had abused their authority when it came to unmasking, et cetera, but we also have to remember that Obama, before he left office, legally expanded, made it legal for these unmaskings and raw data to go around a whole lot more people at the time.
Right.
So this was the loophole that they put in place, and who knows what else they put in place for this. But, I think the Attorney General and Durham have to find something, because after all these years and exactly the most outrageous thing possible. You can hate the president, it doesn't matter, but you cannot leverage foreign governments, the rest of the IC to bring down the president of the United States. This is not the CIA you and I joined, no. And this is not what they should be doing. This is not their mission. And seriously, if we have another intelligence failure, it's because they have veered off this mission completely.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And it's not the agency that you and I joined. It's not the agency the American people deserve. And quite frankly, it's not the agency that the thousands of good people in the agency deserve, because overwhelmingly those people are there not to stage coup attempts or play in domestic politics. They're there to keep American citizens safe. And, meanwhile, we have, we had their director, Mr. Brennan, deciding he's kingmaker. He's going to be part of this plot. And, you said exactly what I've said many times, which is, look, you hate Donald Trump with every fiber of your being, for all I care. That's your right as an American citizen. But the precedent of deciding that we can put aside free and fair elections and stage coups and depose sitting presidents, that's the end of our republic. If you accept that, if we don't get to the bottom of this, the republic is lost.
Exactly. And the bottom of it, and consequences, because without consequences, this is the problem with what we've had with the agency for years. You and I know they've become a political partisan animal, and this has all happened starting with Hayden, and really ramped up with John Brennan, and you can see that now. And if there are no consequences for anybody, the envelope will be pushed worse in the future. That's the thing. Every time they get away with something, they push the envelope even further the next time.
Well, Sabrina, look, we're going to leave it there for today. Thank you very much. As always, we'll be back at it, I'm sure, very soon, because there's always something new coming out in this thing. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
And thank you for listening. We'll see you next time on Ground Truth.